Hello, everyone. I'm reaching out with a heart full of worry and a spirit that feels a little broken. I'm in a difficult place right now, facing a situation that feels overwhelming, and the truth is, I urgently need some financial assistance. It's incredibly hard for me to ask, but I'm truly desperate and don't know where else to turn. If you find it in your heart to help, even a small amount, it would be an absolute lifeline for me. I promise, with all sincerity, to repay your kindness as soon as I possibly can. I understand everyone has their own challenges, so please know there's absolutely no pressure. But if you're able to lend a hand, your support would mean more than words can possibly express. The thought that someone cares, that someone would extend their compassion towards me right now, is enough to bring tears to my eyes. For anyone in India who feels they can offer some help, I've included my UPI scanner below. Every little bit counts, and it could make such a profound difference in my situation. Thank you, from the very depths of my being, for even considering my plea. Your kindness would be a beacon of hope in what feels like a very dark time.
In the previous chapter, we saw Zhuo Yifan explaining the dangers of rising too quickly in power and status, cautioning the demon scheming sect against becoming an easy target for enemies. His strategic foresight humbled the venerables, who finally understood why the sect leader entrusted him with such responsibility. Let's begin the chapter. At the center of the stage, the three elders stood holding a silk sheet, their hands constantly moving as they wrote and calculated the sect's scores. The entire crowd watched them with tense faces, their expressions filled with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. But the same couldn't be said for the demon scheming sect. Unlike the others, they didn't seem to care about the three old men at the center of the stage. Instead, they stood calm and composed, their gazes sweeping over the crowd with quiet confidence. Breaking the silence, Zhuo Yifan began speaking, his voice measured and thoughtful. No one must aim to achieve everything in one go. The consequences would far outweigh the benefits. In the Double Dragon Gathering, we've already achieved results that will secure the sect's future for years to come. So our ranking at the end doesn't matter much. What truly matters is that we accomplish this without interference from outside forces. And that, he said, his voice firm, depends on how well we manage the balance of power among the sects present here. That is where our focus should lie. He paused, his gaze sharp as he looked at his companions. You must understand, achieving a high reward here is just one part of the gains we're aiming for. The real victory lies in forging connections with the other sects. That is what will serve us in the long term. Zhuo Yifan's eyes gleamed as he pointed towards the sects, explaining his thoughts. Among the middle three sects, we've earned the favor of the Demon Soul sect. They owe us a debt and should be friendly. The Sword God sect, through our battles, has become an ally. Among the superior three sects, though I severely injured Ye Lin, Wu Qingqiu is a man of honor. He'll be easy to approach. As for Hellion Flame, while we've had some clashes, I don't sense any hatred from Yan Mo. In fact, I believe they can be approached. His declaration drew a collective gasp from the group. Zhuo Yifan, you nearly killed Yan Mo. How can we possibly get close to someone who must despise us? One of them exclaimed. Zhuo Yifan nodded, his voice calm. That's an assumption based on appearances. Yes, we fought them fiercely last time. But when we encountered them again, they didn't display any personal grudge, treating us as just another competitor. I don't know why that is, but I am confident there is no lingering hostility. He leaned forward, his tone growing confident. They say love and hate are two sides of the same coin. If deep hatred is resolved, it often leads to even stronger bonds. That's why I say Hellion Flame can be approached. Zhuo Yifan's gaze swept across his companions before he continued. There are 4 sects we need to focus on building connections with: Ultimate Clarity Sect, Hellion Flame, Sword God Sect, and Demon Soul Sect. These alliances can save us from countless troubles in the future. But Zhuo Yifan, Kui Gang interrupted hesitantly, we've only made friends with a few disciples. How can we expect them to influence their entire sects for our sake? Zhuo Yifan's eyes sparkled with a knowing look. Ever heard of growing into one's role? That's what this is. By becoming friends with them now, while they're still disciples, we're securing bonds for the future. Most of the participants here are already pillars of their sects. Those who survive this gathering will only grow stronger and more influential. Their sects will have no choice but to value their opinions. Especially figures like Wu Qingqiu and Ye Lin. They can shape their sects' futures. That's why these relationships are worth investing in. Yue frowned, her voice filled with curiosity. But what kind of trouble could we possibly face? Zhuo Yifan shook his head, chuckling softly as he reached out to pat her head. You really haven't been paying attention, have you? In these days of the Double Dragon Gathering, have you not noticed how many toes we've stepped on? We've made enemies among the Universal Righteous Sect, Heaven Trailing Sect, Mystical Heaven Sect, and Beast Taming Sect. Each of them has reasons to resent us. A heavy sigh escaped Fiend Yang as he muttered regretfully, If I had known this earlier, I wouldn't have gone against them. Zhuo Yifan rolled his eyes and retorted sharply, You're delusional if you think that's an option. To make progress in the Double Dragon Gathering, you're bound to offend others. It's the nature of competition. The real question is, who should you offend, and who should you ally with? We've chosen our allies wisely. The sects we've befriended are stronger and more trustworthy than our enemies. Take the Universal Righteous Sect, for example. They abandoned their own people. Even if we hadn't crossed them, I wouldn't want anything to do with a sect like that. The group nodded in unison, the weight of his words sinking in. Zhuo Yifan's voice turned solemn as he delivered his final piece of advice. There's no such thing as true neutrality in this world. Everyone has allies and enemies. Trying to remain neutral only makes you a target. Through these battles, I wasn't just picking opponents. I was choosing our allies and defining your future enemies. His companions stared at him in shock. Our future enemies? Zhuo Yifan smiled faintly, his expression tinged with bittersweet emotion. You'll learn this sooner or later, so I might as well tell you now. Before we came here, I had a conversation with the sect leader. Once the Double Dragon Gathering ends, I'll be leaving the sect. This is my final piece of advice to the labor office. I may not care much for it, but I did help build it. I don't want to see it destroyed. You all are the future of the demon scheming sect. Remember your allies and enemies, or this sect will fall apart the moment it stands out. Fiend Yang's voice trembled with emotion. Wait, why are you leaving? You've earned so much credit for the sect during this gathering. Sect leader Ren will surely name you as his successor. The others nodded in agreement, their faces filled with anxiety. Zhuo Yifan smiled, waving his hand dismissively. There's no need to persuade me. I joined the demon scheming sect to fulfill a deal. Now that I've upheld my end, it's time for me to go home. The word home hung heavily in the air. His companions looked at him, their hearts sinking. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that Zhuo Yifan had never seen the demon scheming sect as his true home. Fiend Yang sighed deeply. If that's your choice, we won't try to stop you. But remember this, no matter where you go, you'll always have a home here. The labor office will never forget you. The others nodded, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. Yue Ling spoke softly, her voice filled with gratitude. You may not think of us as family, but for us, you'll always be our steward, Zhuo. Zhuo Yifan's gaze flickered with a trace of emotion. Though he had always seen the labor office as a tool for his ambitions, he couldn't deny the bonds he had formed here. Helping Yue and Kui Gang, building the elite labor office, these achievements had transformed the once overlooked labor office into a force to be reckoned with. Still, it wasn't the place he longed for. Taking a deep breath, Zhuo Yifan looked at his companions one last time. His journey with the demon scheming sect was over, and yet, as he prepared to leave, he realized it hadn't been a bad experience after all. Just then, the judge's voice rang out, pulling everyone's attention back to the stage. The Double Dragon Gathering scores have been finalized. Exalted Heiran, exalted by May, please verify the results. The elders nodded, examining the silk sheet before handing it back. The judge turned to the 9 sects and announced loudly, "The rankings for the Double Dragon Gathering have been decided. Disciples, step forward to hear the Exalted's words." With a chorus of responses, the disciples assembled on the stage, their expressions tense. Even the heavily injured Zhuo Yifan was helped up. As they stood there waiting, the truth was clear. On that thin silk sheet lay the fates of those who had risen and those who had fallen.